I'd love to talk about LDR season 3. Congratulations, by the way. The short, I
Thanks.
should say the
Yeah.
episode is amazing, but I was curious, like, what was that experience like? Like, how did that come about?
Again, I guess my reputation preceded me a little bit in that I found this email in my inbox from Blur. It was actually from Victoria Howard, who's the producer of LDR. And she reached out and said, would I come in for a meeting? And this was back in summer of 2019. And I didn't really know what it was about, but I did love LDR Volume 1. And I was like, I really hope this is LDR. So I went in for a meeting and I met Jennifer Yuh Nelson. And I guess they'd heard about me from other people in the industry. And they said, we're looking for directors for Volume 2 at the time. And would I be down to read some scripts that they were working on for Volume 2? And what kind of stories would I be interested in telling and that kind of thing, and what I want to do. And I said, yeah, I'd love to. So I went away with a bunch of scripts, and then I zeroed in on The Very Pulse of the Machine short story by Michael Swanwick. I read the short story first, and then I read the script, and I just fell in love with the story. And I went back to Jennifer and Victoria and said, look, I've always wanted to do something that's inspired by Mobius and a tribute to Mobius. And I feel like the abstract nature of this story would work really well. And so they said, okay, great. I put together a pitch deck and pitched it to Tim, and Tim loved it. And so I got the job in the room. And then they said at the end of my pitch, we don't know how the fuck we're going to make this, but that's what the show is all about.
Sorry to interrupt, but when you said Tim liked it, I was going to say, I'm sure there's a few more F-bombs in there. Like, that was fucking great. I really like it.
Yeah, literally. And also, he wasn't wearing shoes, which is classic Tim.
Yeah, flip-flops is the best you'll get from him, or sandals.
Yeah. No, it was awesome. So once that ball started rolling, I started working on it in late 2019, and then it was originally meant to be for Volume 2, but then pandemic and other complications just meant that it got pushed to Volume 3 because we needed extra time. So yeah.
I was talking with Orion Tate. I've known him for decades, and he mentioned the same thing. I think that they originally were looking to do something for season 2 and then ended up getting pushed into season 3 as well. So you're not alone. I'm curious too, like, what was it like working under Tim and Jennifer and Fincher as well, just in general, like the whole creative leadership there?
Well, first I should say I was like obviously working closer with Tim and Jennifer because Fincher, he's doing live action and he's off running around the world, but I worked really closely with Tim and Jennifer, and it was really great. Jennifer really mentored me through the process, which was awesome. Me, Tim, and Jennifer are all very different personalities, and you get us in a room, there's like this like creative like friction because this story it's so abstract, it could go any which direction you wanted. And so we really had to like hone in on what it was about and exactly where sort of emotional arcs and peaks would happen and climaxes and then move on and so on. And Tim actually described the film when we were kind of working in the early days on it. He's like, it's like an art film posing as a survivalist thriller. And I was like, 100%, yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. So I think Tim is like, he's such a big personality and he's just like, just go for it. And Jennifer is very quiet and kind of, but very, cutting and to the point. And then I'm very sort of, nature and the world and like, like, big dreams, hopes, fantasies, so you get the three of us in a room and it's just chaos. Spectrum. It's chaos.
That's cool. I'm curious too, like what attracted you to the story, more specifically even the female protagonist. I'm just kind of curious, like you mentioned before being inspired by Mobius for the art, which again, I love that because not as many people give them props as needed. But yeah, I was curious, like, what inspired you to really kind of take it on in terms of the character and the whole backstory as well?
So I was actually drawn to the story, the kind of hook of this astronaut being stranded on the moon of Io, and what seems like she's talking to herself, talking to a voice. And as you read the short story, I was like, is Martha Kivillson, is she mad? Is she insane? Is she on drugs? Like, what's going on here? And then as the story unfolds, you realize she's speaking to an alien consciousness of the moon of Io. And so I just loved that idea that at the end of the story, you realize that you've been reading this relationship the whole time, and that this relationship really is a kind of a celestial love story. And that's what I was really drawn to first. And the fact that it's a female astronaut is just a bonus, because I was like, yeah, we want to see more cool, kick-ass female characters. So here's a chance to do it. And some of my favorite movies are like Contact and Alien and stuff with just like really badass women. So I wanted to do my own version of that.
I was giving Tim shit about that recently, because that's going to, with Terminator and everything else, it's always kind of been his thing, is tough women, going back decades. So I mean, again, I'm sure he would have been all for it, but I thought the character development was great. Like the whole story in general is just spot on. And I'm guessing heavy metal kind of played a role in terms of the influence a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, I should mention in my initial pitch to Tim that I was like, Mobius is like, such a huge influence on science fiction across genres, across film, and like heavy metal. He was one of the founding artists of it. And I feel like because this show is about, based on stories from heavy metal, it makes sense to do a tribute to him. And they were like, yeah, 100%.
Curious too, like what research did you have to do for the story kind of taking place in outer space?
So we looked into a lot of different things, everything from like the gravity on Io compared to Earth, to light, how much light they get from the sun, and, the speed of the rotation, because Io is spinning very fast around Jupiter, and then on its own axis, it's spinning quite quickly. And, we really went down a bit of a wormhole of research, which was great. But at the end of the day, I kind of made the call that, look, it's got to be believable within the world of the film itself. And if she doesn't have enough gravity to make dragging this sled with a dead body on it look arduous, difficult, and emotionally draining, then it's not going to land emotionally with the audience. So we chose to dial up the gravity a little bit to make it a little bit closer to Earth. I mean, it's still dragging a dead body across the plane for 40 kilometers or so is pretty difficult. So, but it speaks to how strong she is as a character. And then other things like, yes, if we were doing it realistic, there would only be a fraction of the light that you'd see from the sun. So the whole vista wouldn't be lit up the way we have it. But this is science fiction, lean into the fiction a little bit and make it all yellow and bright, and then you can really play with it. Yeah.
I mean, you always got a mix between reality is boring and hyper reality of what the story.
Not to mention when it comes to gravity, I don't even know what a human body would be like under those conditions, being that close to the mass of Jupiter. Whether your blood could even be pumping around your body, I don't know. So
you mentioned too about COVID and that kind of setting things back a bit. I was curious about your experience, like how did that affect things, and also how did you overcome those kind of creative challenges?
COVID hit just as we finished the story reel. I was actually supposed to fly across to Japan to direct the team out at Polygon Pictures. And that all got locked down. And so, and Japan itself got locked down. So everyone at the studio obviously started working from home. So they had to do a big recalibration of, just machinery and everything. And then on my end as a director, it's like, okay, so I was going to be directing these folks from at the studio. I like to not exactly sit over their shoulder, but like be able to communicate with people in person. How can I give that same communication even more? I don't speak Japanese. We had translators, and long Zoom calls. And I would sort of set like, I guess it was sort of like teaching a class, in that I would like shoot video of myself performing Martha's actions. Like I went to Santa Monica Beach and I dragged a weight around and said, look how my hips are moving, you know, as my feet are sliding in the sand, and, you know, the posture of that. And when I'm falling, you know, I fall on this. I did a lot of my own stunts, basically. I fall on this hip and this is the tilt of the body and so on. And so we'd go through and like analyze my videos, and I'd perform all the lip sync, everything. So paintovers. So it was just like, it was very much like a master class with myself, Jennifer Yuh Nelson, Jed, I don't know if you know Jerome Denchen, yeah, who's the VFX supervisor.
$100 if you can get him to smile.
Yeah. One, a great chef. He makes amazing pastries, and two, a wizard at Photoshop. Just in the middle of Zoom calls, I'd be describing, okay, we need it to look a little bit more like this, and what do you know, Jed's like pulling it up as we speak. So total rock star. And then Victoria Howard, I mean, everyone who worked on this show, I'm just like, total top of their game, awesome. So lots of Zoom calls is the answer, and lots of very long Zoom calls because we had to translate everything. So if you imagine me saying one thing and then a translator translating to Japanese folks and then them speaking back. So very long.
Yeah, I can imagine that's going to be a bit problematic.